Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, show about hot takes hotter than hot, tasty pancakes. Welcome to the podcast where we're gonna wreck ya, take a Godzilla and make it into America. If this is your first time to the show, welcome to Pop-O-Holics. Nice. I am your insanely sexy host, and I'm joined by a couple of lesser, not robotic lizards.
Chris Conkling?
And Robo Brian Dupree.
Oh no! He's the full antithesis of everything I could imagine in Brian Dupree.
They've used the skeleton of the original Brian Dupree
for this episode, and sadly, our last episode this month, we have the Godzilla guru himself, Mr. Danny Lopez.
How's it going, guys? Happy to be back, and sad that the last one to talk about a metal reptile.
Yep, super sad talking about the reptiles. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've butchered your name more and more as this month has gone on. I'm sorry. Danny Lopez is what he likes to be preferred. I have gone from Danielle Lopez to Danielle Lopez, and I'm so sorry. You've been great.
You are forgiven.
It's been so good to have you. And why have you been here? Well, we've been talking about all things Godzilla. We're doing this month because of HBO Max's Legendaries, the pictures, the movies of America's Godzilla vs. Kong, which premiered earlier this month, which we covered in a previous episode. We also went back in time, jumped in the old time machine, and went back and watched the 1960s King Kong vs. Godzilla. What a fun romp that was. American version, still my favorite Godzilla movie of all time. And then...
We learned a lot about reptiles.
I learned quite a bit about reptiles. We close out this part of the month because we have like a weird section we'll talk about later in the month. But this is closing out the Godzilla thing. And, and again, in honor of the legendary picture, there is a little someone that shows up. No spoilers, but it might be the robot dinosaur version of our favorite King of the Monsters. No. So, for this week, we are covering Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla.
1954年に日本を襲ったゴジラの骨です。ゴジラのクローンでも作ろうと。いや、我々が計画しているのは生体ロボットと呼ぶべきものです。この骨を利用して最強の対自衛兵器を開発する。例の対自衛ロボット、桐生と命名された。桐生隊には
That is from the trailer of Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. I love it because it's not Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. It's just Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. I really love that nomenclature. And
they have to do something different.
Raging Against the Mechagodzilla.
It is directed by... I like that. It's directed by Mazaaki Tezuka. Written by Wataru Mimura, score by Michiru Oshima. Score by Michiru Oshima, with a budget of $8.5 million, which is like, we'll talk about why that's kind of insane to me. It grossed $14 million, and it stars Yumiko Shaku as Lieutenant Akane Yashiro, who is the main human protagonist, as our notes say. Shin Takuma as Yokomitsu Yuhara. Kana Onodera as Sara Yuhara, and Koyo Takasugi as the Colonel Togashi, and many more. So many talented people in this picture. And what are we going to be talking about? Our history with Mechagodzilla and overall non-spoiler thoughts of this movie. We'll jump into spoilers. What are the themes being explored? Favorite moments? How does Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla stack up against the other films that we've watched? And our final thoughts. So this could be a pretty fun conversation. If you've seen this movie, I think it could be interesting. Jerry.
Let's talk about the metal reptiles.
For starters, if you listen to last week's episode, we talked about King Kong vs. Godzilla, which has a distinct English and Japanese cut. There is two different cuts, and let me know if I'm wrong, but there's two different cuts, but they're very similar. For the American one that you can get on VOD right now, you're going to get a little bit of a different intro, if I'm not mistaken, and obviously the English dub is going to differ in the Japanese like text that you'd get
Correct.
from watching it. But other than that, basically, we don't have something as ridiculous as King Kong versus Godzilla happening here. There's a much more consistent movie across the board, and we all have watched the Japanese version for this record. Yes, we all stayed on
Excellent.
same page. Yes, me and Brian bought ourselves a DVD, $6 on Amazon or something crazy like that. Next Day Prime. It's beautiful.
Definitely worth it.
Yeah, and you get both the English and the Japanese one. So that's the one we watched. I watched a little bit of the dub just to get an idea for how the dub may differ in the quality of the dub so I could speak to it. But we all watched the Japanese version, which is, again, available on Prime. The VOD option, to my knowledge and to what we saw, does not come with the Japanese audio.
Correct.
Physical copies for the win.
Absolutely. Physical media. Bring Blockbuster back. I wish there was a documentary to tell me more about Blockbuster.
If only.
If only there was.
I would love.
said
I mean, personally,
documentary.
I wouldn't have a problem with it. I'd love it. So, what is our history with Mechagodzilla? Danny, the Godzilla guru himself. How do you feel about? And we know how you love the King of the Monsters. One of your favorite
Did you?
kings. One of your favorite monsters. All rolled into one. He's King of the Monsters. But how do you feel about Mecha King of the Monsters? Tell us your history.
The imposter, the old school imposter. So my first experience with live action Godzilla back when ye old toddler times were on the plate was with the Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, the original one from 1974. So Mechagodzilla, although a very famous rival to the king himself, holds a very special place in my heart just because he was the first antagonist that I saw on other than cartoons that fought Godzilla. Back then, he disguised himself as Godzilla, ranging havoc on Japan, and back then Godzilla was painted as a hero. Here, it's a little different, but yeah. Mechagodzilla has seen many iterations, and I've loved every single one of them. I think the one in Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla, Kiryu, is one of my favorites, and we'll talk about him once we're talking about more about the movie. But he is definitely the most unique and I think story driven Mechagodzilla of them all.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting. Coming straight from the Godzilla guru himself, sounds like we picked out a good one here. And to also reiterate, we've covered Godzilla in a previous month when we were talking about King of the Monsters a couple of years ago. You know, with this Godzilla that we're watching, this is the first in is it the millennia?
Yeah,
Or
the
Millennium.
Millennium Cycle.
Millennium.
Yep.
Okay. Which
Yeah,
for
it
some
started
I was
in 1999.
So it did start in the 90s. I wasn't wrong because I was listening to last week's episode. I said, the Millennium Godzilla, did that come out in the 90s? Like a jackass.
Yeah, the Millennium Era was a response really to the 1998 horrifying
The Zilla movie.
Zilla movie of America's first attempt at the stab of the king, and that stab was way off.
Hey, we might
And,
revisit that with my opinions about this movie. Zilla might make a return. As the listeners would
If we're
know.
going to talk about the 1998 Zilla, we need to talk about the 1999 response from Toho, which was Godzilla 2000 or Godzilla Millennium.
From what I've seen, it looks worse than Zilla. So let's move on. Brian, what did you know about Mechagodzilla before walking into this picture?
I knew very little. As listeners will know, I don't have a long history with Godzilla outside of the aforementioned Zilla from the 90s. My first introduction to him on screen was actually recently with Godzilla vs. Kong. So I hadn't seen Mechagodzilla in any other movies prior to that. Christian, I don't want to step on your toes here, but I remember you back in the day had some Godzilla toys. Did you have a Mechagodzilla toy?
I did. Yeah.
Is this something that I remember? Okay.
I had
so
both
that
a
is
Zilla
probably
and then the traditional Mechagodzilla. I had the one that's real silver and shiny. That looks. It's
Yes.
not this one that we watched in this picture though. It was the more traditional, just Godzilla with shiny metal. Yeah, and I love that
It
toy.
all comes out. Christian actually is an undercover fan of kaiju.
I definitely had
But yeah,
it.
that was. I remember loving
knew
that
it.
toy.
I don't know where I got it from, but you're totally right. And I actually didn't remember that I had it until you said, Christian, do you have a Mechagodzilla toy? I'm like, yeah, now that you say, I definitely had the classic Godzilla, but he was just shiny. I didn't know his name was Mechagodzilla, though. I thought he was just Metal Godzilla. I think
I don't know if I did that either.
Yeah, I think I called
right.
him Metal Godzilla because that's what you called Mario and Smash. That was the only equivalence I had. Was the
Metal
Mario, Metal
Right.
Sonic, yeah.
Yeah, and I never saw the old kaiju movies as we talked about, so I just called him Metal Godzilla, I think.
Funny thing that you mentioned that, Christian, because if I remember right, and this is old foggy memory, I believe that in the early 90s, Godzilla had a toy line very similar to the Mad Max and Polly Pockets, where it was an actual face of the monster that you opened up, and you can kind of play with the little tiny kaiju. And I think there was a misspelling, because I remember having one that came with Mechagodzilla, and I think it said Metal Godzilla.
Interesting.
So it might have. I think so. I might be wrong. If anybody knows, I want to know the answer.
I have a box of old toys and back at my home in Tampa. So I believe I still have that toy. So I will be able to find it. I don't know if it'll have a name on it, but I will be able to at least hopefully take a picture of it and be like, yes, proven. I had a Mechagodzilla.
Nice.
Don't know if we'll solve the Metal Godzilla question. I just was an idiot, stupid kid. So who knows?
Let me do
Chris,
some research.
your history with the part reptile, part rubit.
The metal reptile.
Metal reptile.
Well, Christian, as we know, all great heroes in pop culture inevitably end up with some type of evil doppelganger. Darkwing Duck has Nega Duck. Hulk has Red Hulk.
Bizarro Superman,
He-Man-
which is one of my favorite.
He-Man, yes.
Just
Superman has Bizarro. He-Man has Faker. And Godzilla has Mechagodzilla. There's always some type of
The
doppelganger
yang to
involved.
Godzilla's yin.
Yes, and truth be told, I'm aware. I was aware of Mechagodzilla, being friends with Danny and growing up with Godzilla and like the periphery with the 1998 film and cartoons and stuff. But I had never seen a movie with Mechagodzilla in it until the most recent Godzilla vs. Kong. So, truth be told, Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla is the first true Japanese experience and exposure that I've had to the character. And I love the design. The character design of Kiryu is awesome.
fucking movie.
I don't believe we're going into
But
our
you
overall
going, and
thoughts
I
yet.
love the design.
No, I'm just saying I love the design.
I'm just
That's
saying
all.
I love you, and I know you very well.
One of the best.
So let's move on into. I guess I should mention my thoughts. I'm very similar with Chris. I did have a toy, as Brian has just sparked some kind of repressed Metal Godzilla memory in me. I apparently did have a toy, so I thought it looked badass. I was a fan of Zilla. We've talked about this. I love the Zilla, and I would love to see a Mechazilla. I think would be very, very, very tight. So Chris just looked like he pooped his pants.
Funny thing, Christian, if you look at the Godzilla animated series that followed the Godzilla 1998 film, there's no Metal or Mechagodzilla. There is Cyborg or Cyber Godzilla.
Even cooler.
Near the end
Which
of
is
it.
basically the same thing.
Sounds
It's
even
the
more
same
American and even more rad. Does he ride a surfboard? Because if he does, sign me up.
Probably does.
Mechagodzilla on a just churning up some fucking fresh pow pow. That's snow. That's a Colorado term for snow. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Let's move on into thoughts. Overall thoughts of Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. I can start off here to set the tone, set the stage. This is a very interesting movie. I was so stoked when I started watching it. I texted the boys. You begin this film and it's raining, which is something that just hasn't happened in any of the Japanese kaiju movies that I've seen where you actually have rain. And it's framed like the T-Rex scene in Jurassic Park. And it's so effective. And I'm like, yes, this is very cool and ominous. And like they're playing with some of the stuff with scale. And it's very, it is, there's a lot of Japanese elements. Obviously, they're speaking Japanese. That makes it very Japanese, which is not why I would dislike any part of it. for the record. It's got like a big, satellite laser beams that are happening. So it still is very like big monster movie, but just the framing of all of it is so like 90s and early 2000s action movie that I was digging it. It reminded me of Independence Day, reminded me of Jurassic Park. I thought it was really cool. As the movie goes on, I think because of the tone, I had spoke about King Kong vs. Godzilla was kind of my perfect mixture. It was a lot of fun, a lot of special effects you could appreciate. And I would say that I'm definitely leaning heavily on like, I appreciate so much of the special effects. That's honestly the best joyride of this film for me is some of the 90s special effects that they do. They just like the miniatures and some of the computer generated stuff looks incredible. I mean, just absolutely incredible. Like the best in the series that I've seen so far. Just really excellent stuff. The way that they make the monsters more slow, like they're slower in this than the older stuff, and it gives them this kind of seismic weight. The compositing of the smaller characters and the big monsters is better. They have these giant big wave splashes that occur. I just think all of that's so excellent, and it really works. Some of the CG is laughably sci-fi TV bad, but that makes sense seeing the budget. It is not as expensive as a big Hollywood blockbuster during this time. So it's completely understandable that the CG is just kind of silly. I just wish that like when you're making special effects, I think if it doesn't look real, probably don't do it. But this is not the way these filmmakers think. These filmmakers think we want it to look a certain way. We want this to happen. This is how much money we have to make it look like the thing we see, which is also very commendable. It just also adds a little bit of disjointedness between the quality of special effects. And I think that kind of rips you out of the experience.
Also, I want to point out while you're speaking to that the Japanese film industry is very different from the American film industry.
Right, but you can make stuff look really good. There's stuff that looks excellent. That would play on film quite well today. Very similar to, if for fans of The Dark Knight, miniature action set pieces that happen in Dark Knight are stuff that looks really great and would look great, to this day, that looked great then. But then they want to do very anime stuff. There's like very distinctly Japanese action shit that happens that they CGify, and it looks bad. It looks real bad, real rough, which is sad because there's so much good happening. That being said, I don't think it looks that terrible. I mean, it's really not too bad, especially for how old it is. It's really not as bad as it could be, and it looks a lot better than a lot of sci-fi television. And I think the cinematography is excellent. It's awesome. It's like the best of 90s action American movies. It is so inspired, and it's got some actual like balls in it, and it really is going for it. And clearly a lot of time and talent was spent on it. So I really appreciate that. The story's really stupid. The acting's well done. I genuinely like a lot of our characters. I just think the story is just a little like not inspiring. Like I found myself I actually finished this movie in 2 sittings, which is not common even for a movie that I'm not like super already into off the go. I had to finish in 2 sittings because I honestly got really bored. It was just kind of boring, the progression of how everything develops, which we'll talk about in spoilers, but I just found it not as compelling as I wished it was. But that being said, really enjoy the special effects. There's a lot to love about this. Especially it gave me nostalgia for 90s movies. This is a 90s movie, a 2000s movie that I had never seen before. I had nostalgia for the way movies were made back then, and there's a lot of really cool framing, a lot of great cinematography. So overall, pretty positive. Going in with pretty low expectations for most of these movies, pretty positive feelings overall. But let's move on into Brian. Brian, your thoughts on Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla?
Sure. Yeah. I largely agree with a lot of what you've been saying. There are some of the most beautiful shots in any of the Godzilla movies I've seen in this movie, hands down. There's some really, really gorgeous stuff. I actually also watched this in 2 sittings, Christian. I watched the first like half hour the night before, and then the next day came into it, and I think it served me well because the second sitting, I actually had a few drinks, and I was live tweeting, and...
You don't say.
Yeah, it may have been obvious from my silly tweets, but
fuck around and find out Godzilla. Like I was like 100%, 100.
I was losing my shit.
I might have to actually post that
your
one
tweets.
still. Yeah, Danny, I appreciated your interaction.
Oh my god, no! Christopher just sent me a message like, "Have you seen Brian's tweets. And I'm like, hang
Brian
on.
seems to be live tweeting his viewing of Godzilla against Mechagodzilla.
I kid you not, I was laughing out loud at these sequences of things. The belly flop really was my favorite.
Oh yeah, King of the belly flops for sure.
Is it the moon shot with Mechagodzilla? Because I rewatched that like 3 times. I love that shot.
Okay, that's a great shot too.
Yeah.
But the one that I don't know if it's there's a shot where Mechagodzilla is powered down and the sun's behind him and the cityscape. Absolutely gorgeous. Is that what you're asking about, the nice shot?
I was gonna say no. There's a shot where Mechagodzilla's plummeting towards Earth, and
No, it's like the Batman shot.
yeah.
I remember that one
that's
too.
it. Yeah, even the closing shot. There's a closing shot which I won't spoil or whatever. It's not really that much.
Okay.
But I don't know. The shot was very Japanese, very cool. It was like it was almost reminded me of the ending credits of a Japanese anime.
Oh,
So good
At the end.
So
Oh yeah,
fun.
perfect.
So cool.
Perfect.
The mid credit scene.
I honestly I shut the DVD off.
Are you guys serious?
Is there a mid credits?
Yeah, there's a mid-credit
we'll talk.
scene and an after-credit scene.
We'll talk. I mean, I
Oh
didn't.
boy!
Wow.
Sorry,
I
I
am
didn't know
now
I was looking
excited
at-
for spoilers.
I
This is
didn't know I was
interesting.
watching
Okay.
the last episode of a Marvel series. And
Toho Cinematic Universe, yeah.
real thing.
I mean,
but-
it exists.
Just to my my initial opinions, I think some of the effects look really great, and I was caught up in it. There is some stuff that obviously looks dated. I think this movie is one of the strongest thematically of any of the movies that we've watched. The acting is solid. The story, I kind of know the stories are going to be silly. We need our justifications for the crazy stuff happening. But I think we get some good emotional backstory, and the relationship between one of our main characters and their daughter, I think is really sweet and well played out, even though it's not given all that much screen time.
Extremely well acted. Again, for the second time
Yeah.
in a row, the Japanese actors are absolutely incredible.
No doubt. And this is the movie, similar to Godzilla vs. Kong most recently. I realized that I enjoy these most as like professional wrestling almost, where there's just narratives around these giant, insane things, and you're just caught up in who's the heel and who you're supporting. And I had a lot of fun watching it from that perspective. So there was more than enough to like for me here.
I am so happy to hear that.
Chris,
I have no idea.
your thought? This was your first viewing of this particular?
Yes, so this was the first time I had ever seen Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. And when I first started watching the movie, I believe I texted you guys, and I completely agree with what Christian and Brian, you're saying about the cinematography in this movie. I texted you, I was like, this is absolutely 21st century cinematography. Like, I was so happy to finally be here after watching so many Godzilla movies from the 50s all the way up to the 90s. It was really fun to finally see a Godzilla movie that had been shot after the year 2000. So right off the bat, just as you said, Christian, I was really enjoying the framing of all the scenes and the rain and Godzilla, and I have to say I had a ton of fun with this movie. I'm a big fan of mecha anime. As I mentioned in our weekly upload, I'm a big fan of Gundam. I like Evangelion, Gurren Lagann. Like if there's a person piloting a giant mech, I'm in for it. And that's a big aspect of this movie. For the first time, as Brian mentioned, I think the human characters in this film are the most captivating I've seen out of any Godzilla film that we've watched. Lieutenant Akane has a legitimate character arc in this movie.
She does.
Yeah.
And I feel like she has an excellent redemption story that takes place in this film. And we can get into that a little bit more when we're talking about themes. But for the first time, I was actually interested in what the humans were doing, as well as what Godzilla and Mechagodzilla were doing in this movie. And that's so rare. You've heard me say so many times over the course of these episodes where we watch these kaiju films, like, the human stuff was garbage, but I really enjoyed the monster fights. And this was the first time where I was like, I really enjoyed the monster fights, and I also really like the human stuff. And like I said in episodes earlier in the month, like, it's so difficult to find that balance. And I know, Christian, you don't necessarily agree with this sentiment, but For me personally, I actually was very captivated by what all the human characters were doing, and I was just pleasantly surprised by that because it's just so hard to come by in this genre. So yeah, I really dug this movie. As I mentioned earlier, Kiryu's design is probably the coolest Mechagodzilla design out of all of them.
So sick.
Absolutely.
When we get to spoilers, I'll talk a little bit more about why I also like this design. But yeah, I really like this movie. I had a blast watching it. And while you mentioned, Christian, that the CGI isn't like top notch, I took into consideration that, yeah, this is out of the Japanese film industry, the years 2002. I don't expect the CGI to be like on par with what we currently have. The Godzilla movie before this, was that Godzilla 2000, Danny?
The
Japanese Godzilla movie before this one.
Yeah, because they make the Zilla, who's like a villainous character.
I'll just ask straight out, Danny, which Godzilla movie does he fight all the different monsters with like terrible CGI?
Yeah, they fully CGI the monsters, which is a bad call.
That's Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, All Monsters Out Attack, or GMK is what the fan base has dubbed it. I actually like that movie a lot.
It's Godzilla.
Did that come out before or
Infinite
after this
Playlist
movie?
Is what it is.
Yeah, it actually came before this one.
Okay, so that's the point I'm trying to get across. Like,
Yeah.
they've had movies prior to this one with CGI in them where the CGI was also kind of lackluster. But despite the CGI not being super polished, I think they actually use it really efficiently. Prior to this, all of our kaiju monsters have been kind of lumbering. But what they do in this film is they take the CGI and they're able to use it to give Mechagodzilla some agility, which is nice to see. It was a lot of fun. What can I say?
It is, and I certainly think it's again, I put it above Sci-Fi Channel level special effects because some of them are just absolutely gorgeous. I just think in camera, some of the stuff is like, you could do this. For instance, like the planes. There's a lot of planes in this, and they're Harrier jets. And I just feel like with miniatures, they would have looked better, and they're clearly good at doing miniatures. So I just think that using the CGI to do stuff that they're better at doing miniatures with is just like, I get that they're trying to incorporate the new technology, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the film industry overall that's happening with CGI at this time. It's just, they're so good at the miniature stuff that it's like, it looks better if it's a miniature. When you're doing it with what you have, right? CGI can look very great. We saw, what is it, in Godzilla vs. Kong? There's an incredible shot, because I rewatched the last 30 minutes of action stuff to get more reference for all the stuff that I loved, which is the monster at combat, which is incredible in that film. There's a shot of the anti-grav flyer, and it like goes up the scales of Godzilla and comes out of the gravity hole and through a building and over Kong, and it's just like the most epic, awesome and you can't do that with a miniature. That's just like CGI beauty. But if they did that and it looked bad, and they're like, this just looks very terrible compared to what else we can do, it's like, I don't understand why they're just not using miniatures for this kind of stuff. So that's a little frustrating, knowing that they're so good at this one aspect of it that they're
understandable
anchoring on something else. But other than that, I agree. I mean, there's even a shot that looks bad that has to do with Mechagodzilla, like charging Godzilla and like knocking him back. And it's not a great looking shot, but it's very effective and it's very cool. So that kind of stuff I think works well. And I think that has more to
Straight hockey checks him. It's a
Yeah.
real,
And that
real
might
drop the shoulder.
not be actually CGI. It almost looks like compositing. It almost looks like some in-camera shit that they're doing. So I don't know if I can attribute that, because all the planes.
Mechagodzilla used tackle, and it was super effective.
Danny, you've seen all the Godzilla movies. How does it stack up?
It's actually one of my favorite movies. It has I think one of my favorite Mechagodzilla, just like Chris. Kiryu is definitely very, very popular in the Godzilla scene. There's a
What a
lot
hot
about
scene.
Yeah.
I think of scenes where I can go into and be like, where are the women at? I think of
where the reptiles
where
at.
the fertile reptiles at.
But no, this definitely has a very, very unique Mechagodzilla design. They were definitely going for a little bit of a different approach as far as how they told the story. I loved the limitations that, story-wise, the limitations that the Mechagodzilla, they imposed on him. There were certain grounding aspects. It wasn't like a perfect machine, and we'll talk about this in spoilers, but it was over the top without being too over the top, where it's way out of spectrum. But yeah, the cinematography was beautiful. I love Lieutenant Akane's story, how her redemption, like Chris mentioned, just how she deals with some of the problems that she incurs as the story goes on, and dealing with her teammates as what she's doing as part of she's essentially the pilot of Mechagodzilla, of Kiryu. And
they give her a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, they give her a big amount of responsibilities. Like, you got to take out Godzilla. Have fun. It's definitely one of the more unique films, and it actually has a direct sequel. In the Millennium series, no movie has a sequel. Every movie is sequeling 1954's original. This is the only movie that was either successful enough that they said, we need to continue this story. This story is not over yet. And this movie laid the groundwork. Kiryu is a fantastic Mechagodzilla, not an alien. It's human built, and the way that they build them is definitely fascinating. And again, we'll talk more about this in spoilers, but it's my favorite Mechagodzilla based film.
It's the sequel to this Mechagodzilla Against Corrosion.
That was the working title. That was the project name. They decided that was not going to work.
That's Mechagodzilla Against Planned Obsolescence.
Absolutely, yeah. They that was actually what the file name was when they submitted it to burn on DVDs and
how one produces
whatever VHS
movie in Japan.
It was actually a team-up buddy comedy, Mechagodzilla and WD-40.
Yep, you absolutely nailed it.
No squeaks to be found. Those are our general thoughts on Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. I keep almost wanting to say versus. I love that it's against, but it is tripping me up.
Danny, I do have a question. Maybe you can clarify this. In Japan, it was actually called Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, despite already having a movie called Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Is that correct?
It was called Godzilla Cross Mechagodzilla. So as opposed to actually being Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, I forgot what the versus translation is in Japan. But if you actually look at the title, you'll see it. It's Godzilla Cross Mechagodzilla.
What's up?
So more akin to like what came before it, and the against is kind of a westernization.
Right, to kind of differentiate it. I know that a lot of fans actually call it Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 3, just because this is the third overall Mechagodzilla. So if you look it up online, the fan base tends to call it Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 3.
GVMG3. Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
We're there. Hey, listen, we're the nerds right now.
Hey, you guys pay attention. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Look at you all.
I try.
You've grown.
I try. All right. So those are our overall thoughts of the movie. All of us give it a recommend if you're into this sort of kaiju thing. I think it's a very interesting, cool stuff. A lot of stuff to get from. And clearly, high praise from the kaiju master himself. Someone who gives a shit about the kaiju is giving it the thumbs up, saying this is one of his favorite ones. So,
all kaiju matter.
Don't say that.
And I killed Christian.
Oh boy.
We're going to replace... So it looks like you're not the one being replaced with Chris Nolan, Christopher. We're replacing the other Chris, since he's probably dying.
Sorry, I just couldn't believe what I heard. Let's move on into spoilers, starting now.
Metal reptiles.
This movie really wanted me to watch. This movie really made me want to watch the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. And
Yes.
There's some fun feels about it. Yeah.
couldn't put my thumb on it.
I would still say that the CGI in Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla is still better than that 90s Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie.
Let's not talk about that movie, please.
It's close. I'd say it's close. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'd say it's closer than you're remembering. I mean, it looks bad. I know it looks bad, but
As somebody who saw that
awful.
movie not too long ago, you're wrong. This movie's way better.
meet my kids. God, I really love that movie. But watching this movie the whole time made me like very nostalgic for that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. Should I revisit it, Danny? Is that a good idea?
I wouldn't do so unless you want to make a drinking game out of it, like I did last time.
I make a
watched
drinking
it.
game out of life, my friend.
All right, so here's how that game goes. Every time there's a backflip that happens,
Oh my God.
There's a
You
point where the
take a-
Blue Ranger out of suit does like 18 backflips, Danny.
that's what I'm saying.
In the
You will
junkyard.
probably
You're
be
in a
almost
parking garage
dead.
or something, right? I remember this scene.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's
The
incredible.
first initial fight.
He goes,
scene,
what's
yeah,
the
so-
fastest way that I can get 30 meters backwards? And his solution is
Backflips.
47
Backflips.
backflips.
Yeah, only 20 minutes of the movie have passed and you're already dead, collapsed on the floor for that sign.
I just love myself some Ivanus. Anyway, this isn't about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. We'll revisit that film another time. We're talking about Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla. So let's talk about themes. What we saw in this movie. What is this movie trying to say? Brian, start with you.
Sure. So I think one of the main things is from the human perspective, dealing with grief and how you handle trauma. We see some of our main characters lose people, or we learn that they have lost people, and see, really positive ways to deal with grief and still maintain a positive perspective on life going forward, and a hopeful one. So I think that that's something that, like I was saying earlier, I think is one of the strongest thematic things that we've seen in any of these Godzilla movies. Stuff that's explicitly on the page. The daughter, Sara, she's really the whole time trying to remind the adults that these are living creatures as well, whether it be Godzilla or, the bones of Godzilla, which we learn there's still something alive in there. The memory of Godzilla is still there on some level. But yeah, her just bringing empathy and sympathy to these giant creatures that we just view as either weapons or something to be destroyed. So yeah, I think those were probably the main themes that I took away from this one.
Absolutely.
Danny.
Yeah. I agree with Brian 1,000%. There's a lot of grief that is represented on the film. Guilt is another one. Lieutenant Akane is throughout the entire movie. You can definitely tell that she feels remorse for what she did. She feels guilty that because of whatever decisions she made at the beginning of the film, she panics, moves her tank, and kills a group of her comrades. And throughout the entire movie, all of the Kiryu Force, specifically a character named Hayama, constantly reminds her of that she messed up, that she, because of their colleagues were dead, and it's interesting because you see her grow throughout the film, and she learns to deal with that grief, to deal with that guilt, and overcome it, and kind of starts relating to not related, but finds a life lesson from Sara, the little girl. Kind of sometimes you have to understand that every life matters, and that she is as important to the living as anybody else, regardless of the mistakes that she made in the past. And she redeems herself and actually boards up Mechagodzilla or Kiryu and delivers the final blow that does not kill the king, because he's the king. He's amazing. But yeah, I think guilt and grief are very, very present. Also, robots.
I just want to say Sara should have been prime minister. she would have handled everything a lot more.
Oh,
smoothly.
absolutely.
She was the
True.
smartest person in the entire movie.
Maybe she'll grow up to be Prime Minister.
I mean, and if you look at it from a certain perspective, this movie also deals with necromancy. Chris, your thoughts?
Oh,
It does a little bit.
Danny, I'm just gonna tell you not to host this show. It's my show. Chris,
edging in here.
on necromancy. Any comment? What are your thoughts?
Not on
the themes?
necromancy, but I do have to say, Brian and Danny pretty much covered the themes that you can grab out of this movie. But again, like I said earlier in the show, I think there are also themes of redemption. Danny touched on it.
Yeah.
Akane makes a very dire mistake at the beginning of this film, and she has to live with that guilt over the course of the entire film, and that guilt influences the decision that she makes. But I think by the end of the movie, Akane gets redemption. Hayama gets his redemption. He's very hateful toward her, like Danny mentioned, over the course of the film, and he gets a hero moment toward the end. So he gets his redemption. And I'm going to go ahead and just say this is my headcanon, because it's never explicitly stated. But even the original 1954, maybe Godzilla gets a little bit of redemption for destroying Tokyo in the 50s. He's resurrected as a robot version of himself, and he gets to fight an evil version of his species in this film.
He does do a fair share of destruction when he first wakes up.
I think when
though.
he has the most control of like the resurrected.
No, he's actually just destroying
He's
Tokyo.
actually
again.
like,
That's why I
cool.
said
Going ham.
I guess I'm gonna fuck it up with
I'm
missiles.
joking.
These
He's
things
like,
stung
I got-
like bees.
I got boom boom arms.
I was here for it. To be fair, let's not.
It's like,
I'm
started the
joking.
trend.
That's not something that like actually exists
No,
in this movie
I hear you.
on the page.
Head cannon.
No, I like that. I
yeah.
like that.
Prefaced it well.
But I do have to say, Mechagodzilla Kiryu being made out of Godzilla's original bones from 1954 is one of the things I like most about this movie. And I even told Danny while I was watching it, I was like, I am actively rooting against Godzilla for this entire film. I don't view Godzilla as the hero in this movie. And,
he's
and of
not.
course, over the entire franchise, Godzilla, kind of goes back and forth between hero and villain. It depends on
if
which
there's
movie
another
it is.
monster in the movie. If it's just Godzilla,
Sometimes he is on the same movie. He's both hero and antagonist. He is an antagonist to the humans because he destroys.
Godzilla is a reptile that is
He's
just
indeed a reptile.
He's a reptile. It's just a force of nature.
Exactly.
He's more of man versus
reptilian
nature versus rather than man versus man, right? He's just a force of nature.
But I had a lot of fun actively rooting against him and rooting for Kiryu over the course of this entire film.
I mean, he's just
As
an
much
asshole.
as I love Kiryu,
in this
I will always root for Godzilla. But
Danny has what I call an unconditional love for Godzilla.
You don't say.
absolutely.
That
You don't
that I don't have. If Godzilla is doing horrible shit, he is the villain of the movie.
I support him. If he wants to destroy the humans, you know what? They deserved it.
This is why I would never trust Danny's pet. You know, because he would just root for if the dog was chewing my arm off, he'd be like, listen, little baby Zilla.
Oh, look at him.
You'd name your kid.
He's
you'd
a
name
good
your
boy.
Hey,
dog.
look at that good boy. See, that's the thing. Is that
Playing with you.
if Godzilla were to come out of the ocean, a lot of people would be running against it, like the other way. I would be running towards him.
Yeah, you'd
With
be
a
the
tree.
psychopath, like
Trying
down
to get that boop.
You'd be like
Look at
the
that.
people in Independence Day who have the signs that's like, "We want to fuck you, aliens." You know.
That's one of the greatest moments in cinema when they get destroyed. I should have say.
You know what? If I'm gonna go,
I think it's
I'll-
shitting
I'll
on
go.
hippies. I think that scene
It
is
is a
shitting
little
on
bit,
hippies.
but it's hilarious.
yeah, it's fantastic.
This movie's not very clear in its themes to me. I really don't know what to think about it because they reference the 50s Godzilla. They resurrect it with a robot who goes rogue for like a second and then isn't. And then our main story is about, a father who's very, very lonely after losing his wife and really much wants to bang our protagonist. Very much so. And I don't blame
Daughter
him.
calls him a wolf. It's incredible.
It's great, wonderful. Yeah.
And then our main protagonist is a female character who is trying to have this redemptive arc and ends up controlling Mechagodzilla for reasons I can't explain why she was chosen. The movie doesn't say I don't know. The movie doesn't really take me from point A to you made a mistake in your career to you now are in charge of controlling Godzilla. Because from kind of the beginning mission, she's calling very large shots of the mission from the get-go.
She's supposed to be like an ace pilot.
Yeah.
That made a devastating mistake.
Right.
But the military still acknowledges her skills and how good she is as a soldier. So it's this one horrible mistake has kind of tainted the rest of her record.
Yeah.
And that's what she lives with, between 1999 and 2003 is when this movie takes place.
I feel like there's definitely some sexism happening here too. The men are clearly against her from the beginning, seemingly partially because she's a woman, and then obviously her flaws in the past.
Yeah, and she does have that
Her
one great
superior,
moment where
though.
she gets to put that guy in an arm lock. That's fun.
Yeah, she's definitely very skilled as a combat specialist and as a pilot, and it's kind of cool because her superior recognizes that ability and tries to kind of do whatever he can to put her back in the pilot seat because he knows this is the person that can bring us the victory. She's as experienced as she needs to be, and I did like the support. I forget what her commander's name is, but I did really
the best, deepest Japanese voice I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah,
I
that man
love
Is it
that.
Togashi, Danny?
Togashi. Yeah,
When he comes in the locker room and he's like, "We'll have none of that in the locker room. You're gonna fuck up my teamwork." His deep, resonating voice is the coolest, and that's what I love. That moment, I was like, "This is why I watched the Japanese version to hear this guy come in." And obviously, I'm gonna be butchering Japanese language, but he comes in and he's like, he's like, "If you're gonna be in here, do not you're gonna be messing up my teamwork." And it's just so commanding and beautiful. It's the equivalent of a really hard ass general in the United States Army.
and even his look, his look is very stoic and just I would not want to mess with
the
that person.
delivery though is just that classic, okay, yes sir, yes. If he came up to me and started yelling,
People fall in line.
yeah, exactly. But it's so powerful, it's so good. So I mean, jumping back to themes, I definitely see that. It's just that I guess I'm not connecting the dots with her as a pilot and her as going and now Mechagodzilla will sit down on the island. It's just this weird disconnect between the fiction of kaiju fights and robot mechanisms.
She also runs to the radiation, right? It's implied there's radiation around the
Inside
mecha,
Kiryu, yeah.
and she still
The way
goes
he's
into
powered.
so she's running
right
straight
towards
into
the
line
end.
of-
Clearly, she controls it. I get that, but I'm there's a disconnect for me as far as thematically, what she's good at and what's happening with the robot lizard. So, I mean, as far as themes, clearly it's a redemptive arc, but I just find it all over the place in terms of you're telling a story and you have this giant robot and kaiju. And that's one story, and the human characters are one story. This is something that feels still very disconnected. And it's why are these things happening at the same time? Because a good human story involves X and a good kaiju film involves Y, right? And those don't seem to be complementing each other in ways that I find satisfying as far as what's the purpose of this? Brian, you disagree?
I just want to maybe push back a little bit because I think it's a combination. What worked best for me thematically was Sarah's arc and how she's holding this plant, which we come to learn she's kind of associated with her mother, right? So we have the bones of Godzilla in Mechagodzilla. She's lost her brother. Akane's lost her brother as well, right? And so they both have these traumas, and Sarah kind of helps her through it and gives her life meaning again. And so she still goes out there, puts her life on the line after failure. So I think it works relatively well for me, but I get that her side, like you said, I think offline, Akane's story could be fleshed out a little further.
Right.
So, Brian, I think this is a good opportunity to bring up what Danny and I mentioned earlier while we're talking about Sarah's arc, and that is the coda of this film. Did you guys see the scene where Sarah and Akane have the conversation and Sarah's no longer holding the plant? She's been able to grow past...
No.
Towards the end, yeah.
Oh Man.
Last
So,
shot that I saw
the
was
movie-
the beautiful shot of Akane on Mechagodzilla looking at Godzilla go into the ocean.
On the shoulder. Just gorgeous.
So the movie continues into the credits where they get Kiryu back to the base.
Thanks for the heads up.
And there's another
There's your mid-credit
interaction.
scene. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another interaction between Akane and the scientist and his daughter Sara. You guys didn't see that?
No.
That's a shame.
That's a shame. I've definitely seen it since. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does complete the whole arc of the movie because, she's taken Akane's advice as far as like, letting the grief go, basically. To your point, Brian, about grief being a major theme in this film, she's able to let go of the plant, something that she associates with her mother, and she herself is also able to grow. So both Akane and Sara are able to grow based on each other's advice to one another.
That plant, I think, is a perfect thing a plant that responds to touch, something that is like her trying to make an argument that all life is meaningful. I thought that was pretty poignant.
Agreed.
Right, which is at the end of the day why I think the most powerful thing is that Akane theoretically doesn't kill Godzilla, right? And maybe has the opportunity. And you can look at it as the weapon isn't powerful enough, but clearly Godzilla isn't frozen or anything, and Akane uses Mechagodzilla to tank into the ocean and doesn't kill it, just kind of scares Godzilla off.
It's almost
Drives
like
him away.
they both hold back.
Sure. So I can definitely see that. I think that's stuff that's working. I think where my issue is that there's this kind of misdirect with Godzilla's consciousness taking over, very similar to what we see in Godzilla vs. Kong, the American version, of Godzilla's conscious taking over, the old bones, the old DNA taking over. And that seems set aside. I think the story is using it as the pilot, someone must get in there and actually run the thing, and that's Akane's journey. And I can see that. But there's this missing link between the horrors of Godzilla, who's a man-made creature, right? We're going back to like the historical reason Godzilla exists is because of like, look at the abomination of what man science does to nature and how nature responds, right? That is the core drama of the original Godzilla and the core theme of Godzilla as this atomic lizard of death, which I think Shin Godzilla addresses very well with modern bureaucracy and so on and so forth. In this film, man is able to like ward away Godzilla by making a robot Godzilla. And to me, that's like where the massive ideas of what Godzilla represents as like this abomination of science, this film almost feels antithetical to the entire premise of Godzilla, where man overcomes Godzilla with science. And so for that and the human characters, their arc of regret and stuff, I just don't feel like it's fully meshing into a perfect idea of what this monster movie franchise could be. And that's where I feel a little bit disappointed. But again, we're talking very great big themes of what this character represents and what the idea of humans trying to combat this threat means. And I think it does a disservice to Godzilla's origins on a thematic level. And I think that's where I'm disappointed, is that the human stuff seems not interested in that. The whole kaiju narrative doesn't seem interested with that. And that kind of left me wanting more, especially when you have a scene in which Godzilla's consciousness of the original Godzilla takes over Mechagodzilla, and that's kind of dropped for the rest of the film.
I can definitely see that. Like in most Godzilla films, the conclusion of the film is that all of our human characters have learned to kind of be better people and respect nature based on their interaction with the monster over the course of the movie. But in this one, there's a clear triumph
Right.
over nature, like you were saying. The humans, while they haven't killed Godzilla, they celebrate at the end of the film. And I think the only characters that truly learn a lesson, like we've already mentioned, are Kana and Sara. But it's a more personal, intimate lesson than like that overarching leave nature alone, respect nature theme that you're talking about.
They celebrate, but it didn't seem as clear cut of a victory as they seem to think it was.
They won.
Right. They take it as a win because they were able to force Godzilla to go away.
Right.
They didn't necessarily kill him. It wasn't a true victory, but it was a victory in the sense that for the first time ever, after all of these kaiju battles that Japan as a country has experienced, they were finally able to ward off one of these predators. They've never been able to do that before.
Yeah, it's they. It doesn't to me. It didn't feel like a full blown celebration. It definitely feels like we won the battle, but not the war.
Right.
They simply just drive him away, and the wording that they use is like, we managed to drive him away. We didn't manage to kill him, but it's a step in the right direction. Definitely.
Oh, we built something that could fight him. Right.
Yeah, they can par him for now. This is something that obviously gets more of a conclusion in Tokyo SOS, which is the direct sequel to this. That movie does definitely feel a lot more conclusive at the end than this, but this definitely kind of sets up that finale, and I think it ends well. It's kind of we didn't beat him, but we were good enough to make him go away, and by the end of the movie, they actually do inflict a big amount of damage on Godzilla. You can physically see him bleeding.
He has a huge scar on his chest.
Yeah, and funny thing, and I know the following movie, Tokyo SOS, Godzilla actually has a scar, a healing scar in his chest from the Absolute Zero cannon. So I thought that was actually really cool that they incorporated that. Like they show it at the end here. You can see he is definitely heavily wounded. And the fact that when he comes back in the next film, I thought that was kind of a cool touch to kind of build that continuity.
Yeah, maybe this is just to close out thematically of like what I don't think is like super cohesive. And this actually is a criticism on the original Godzilla, I believe, if memory serves, and what this movie is telling me is correct, which is a phrase that Chris loves. Scientific fuckery caused the problem and then fixes the problem. And that to me is a little too convenient and a little too like, maybe that is a great truth, but I just don't feel like it's as satisfying as I'd like it. But then again,
yeah, that's fair.
Fair enough.
So off of themes, let's move into some of our favorite moments of this film. I'll leave this open. Who wants to go first? Who's got a moment they're dying to reminisce about?
I'll let you guys go first because I have way too many. So I'll let you guys.
I think Hayama's redemption that we were talking about earlier is one of the best moments in the movie. You know, after bullying Akane for the entire course of the film, and then sacrificing himself by flying into Godzilla's mouth so he couldn't fire his atomic breath, and giving Kiryu the chance to fire the Absolute Zero cannon. I think that's an epic moment, and it's a moment that's earned, which you don't always get in these movies. So some of the giant spectacle scenes in these films don't always feel earned. They feel like they're just kind of cool for cool's sake. You know, they're just fun to watch. But I feel like this is a character beat and an action moment that is built to in the film, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's definitely a great moment. We've talked around it a bunch, but when we get the zoom in to Mechagodzilla's eye and he has the memory of OG Godzilla, at that point, when he just starts tearing shit up, I was totally there for it. I was like, oh man, okay, he's been waiting 40 years or whatever it is, and now he's coming back to give humanity their due. But it builds into him powering down, because we know that he only has 2 hours of time charge or whatever, and it builds to that shot that I mentioned earlier. It's my favorite in the movie, of him powered
Beautiful
down
shot.
against the city with the sun. Just absolutely gorgeous stuff. Godzilla atomic breath blasting all of the jets, even though the jets look kind of silly. I was just caught up in how much ass he was kicking and how truly powerful his atomic breath was, in a way that coming off of Godzilla against Godzilla versus
King Kong versus Godzilla.
King Kong versus Godzilla. Coming off of King Kong versus Godzilla, where the atomic breath didn't have a lot of heft to it in nearly the same way. Obviously, CG limitations. Well, no CG at the time, but special effects limitations.
Rotoscope.
But yeah, I really enjoyed the atomic breath generally. Everything from Kiryu being airdropped into the last final battle, and the final battle itself. Christian, you mentioned the moonshot. It was just, I was completely caught up in it and having so much fun. I felt like, I almost felt sympathetic for Godzilla at some point, because Mechagodzilla had like a spring-loaded, electrified knife or something.
That was
Dagger,
I was like,
some
that
sort of
is a
dagger.
cheap
hidden
shot,
dagger
man.
shiv of
Not
like
cool.
Yeah.
Not cool. That's jail rules, and I was a little bit disrespected by that. But yeah, those were some of my favorite moments.
Danny.
You want to go last? Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with Chris and I agree with Brian. I think I love the scene where Kiryu actually awakens to the roar of the new Godzilla and recalls his DNA essentially reacts to its instinct, which is to destroy Tokyo, and the fact that he was super armed with all these additional weaponries. For a moment in that film, we actually see the 1954 Godzilla again, live again and terrorize Tokyo, probably even in a worse way, just because he had much more armament than he did before. I liked the one of the scenes where they fire the absolute cannon and Godzilla realizes what's happening, that he's about to get shot, and he throws an atomic breath at Kiryu to unbalance him and forces the shot away. It's fun. It's kind of funny how, even though, you know, they always say Godzilla as a reptile has a very small brain, and this is something that's carried into the legendary Godzilla. He's combat smart. He adapts. He learns. He recognizes what's happening, and he quickly reacts to the threat. So it's what makes him so fearsome as an opponent, and why they have so much trouble. Not just because of his just physical properties, he is also very combat smart, and you see that in this movie.
Is the small brain thing a piece of the mythos outside of that American cut of King Kong versus Godzilla?
No,
I
I'm
always
saying
took
that
him to be intelligent.
he is intelligent. He's always been depicted as intelligent. Hell, in the Heisei series, Godzilla has 2 brains.
Can't talk.
Yeah, he can talk. He's not that smart, but no, he is very combat smart. I know that the humans kind of think he's just doing it for, like, why is he doing it? Why is he doing it?
Yeah.
He is very combat savvy in every way, shape, or form. He knows exactly what he's doing. It's like to your thing, Brian, destroying the jets. He knows he can't reach them. All right, I'm gonna burn them. So that's really fun. The fight where Kiryu comes in, the part where Kiryu comes in and just tackles him, and it was a super effective move, and Godzilla sent it flying.
Yes.
Was also really kind of a fun scene.
Yeah, I love when all the bullshit about rockets, because, you know, rockets are dumb in this series. You know, it's like there's never any like drama with rockets heading towards Godzilla. It's not like rockets shoot out and we're like, oh no, Godzilla, those are rockets. It's not like.
But what if we do like 40 at once?
Yeah, well,
Is that
I mean,
gonna
There are
take her
never
down?
any stakes.
maybe. No, rockets still suck ass. I don't know why you built the giant robot lizard to have rockets, because they don't do anything. I have a real problem with rocket usage in these Godzilla movies, but that leads to my favorite moment, which the rockets have all been fired. Okay. Then the monster, the Mechagodzilla's like, nope, I'm going to go hand-to-hand combat with you. It's very satisfying. It's lumbering. It's some of the most effective kind of man-in-suit kaiju fighting that we get in any of these movies. It's very cool. Very big and blumbering. And then they kind of get in a gridlock. And guess what Mechagodzilla decides to do? While we're in the gridlock, I'm going to shoot fucking rockets at you. And they kind of fuck up Godzilla a bit, and he's able to get in another like punch or something. So I was appreciative, because it's the first time in any of these goddamn movies that rockets did anything to Godzilla. And they mostly were just like a mosquito bite of like, fuck. And then the Godzilla gets distracted for a second, and Mechagodzilla fucks him up. You guys mentioned a lot of stuff. I think Moonshot is like the most, it's so stupid looking, but it's awesome at the same time. It's Godzilla.
Yeah.
Mechagodzilla falling from the sky with the moon as a backdrop. I'm like, oh, these people like cinema. That's cool. So I appreciate that. I just like in general just appreciate all the 90s shots of like the camera moving in and it's panning as like there's just so much parallax effect happening with our characters in the background. It's just, there's so much momentum. It's like pre-Michael Bay, but definitely what Michael Bay like took to like 100 when he got his hands on a camera and started filming Transformer shit. You know, it's got just a lot of momentum throughout. So I just really appreciate the cinematography throughout. I think it's all very good. There's just some really nice shots too of there's like the whole battle, like the whole station of the command central, and there's like a really strong zoom in to like the whole command station at one point. That's just so cheesy, but so awesome. And I just love that momentum of the film. That's just kind of what like definitely put a smile on my face, is that when the movie's having fun and going full like 90s action, it's just like, it's totally in it, totally committed to it. It's a lot of fun. So definitely cinematography takes my favorite moments is just like how everything's shot for the most part. How do we think this stacks up to all the films that we saw? We'll start with you, Chris.
Are we speaking to just the films we watched this month, or all the Godzilla films that we've seen?
All Godzilla films in the Pop-O-Holics Godzilla canon, which I think, if I'm going to list them all, includes King Kong vs. Godzilla, involves King of the Monsters, Legendary's King of the Monsters, Legendary's Godzilla vs. Kong, also covers Shin Godzilla.
Godzilla vs. Biollante, Shin Godzilla.
Gojira vs. Biollante, and Zilla. 98 Zilla, I believe, are all the films covered.
Considering all those movies, nothing is ever going to top Shin Godzilla for me. Like we've said before, I think that's outside of the 1954 Godzilla, that's like the most perfect version of what Godzilla is supposed to be, what he was supposed to be originally. Mm-hmm. But truth be told, out of all the other movies that we've watched, at least here on the show, I'm not counting the other Godzilla movies that I've seen in my own downtime, I think I would put Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla at number 2, directly under Shin Godzilla.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Because we haven't watched the original Godzilla here on the podcast, so I can't count that. I enjoyed watching this more than a lot of the Legendary movies. That's just my personal take.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say I would not put it that high. I think it's interesting because it's some of the older stuff is so old that it's interesting from a how they're doing special effects perspective. And I think this is in that weird place of having some stuff that really doesn't hold up even 20 years or less than 20 years down the line. So I think it can take it takes me out of it a little bit more so than some of the older stuff maybe. Something that's missing here that I really liked about some of the movies is the comedy. I think the silly slapsticky nature is kind of missing from this, and maybe makes it drag a little bit more than some of the other ones because of that. But like I said, I think the emotional stuff does work pretty well here. So yeah, I think it's kind of middle of the road for me for those reasons, but has some of my favorite moments.
Brian, to add a little more context to what I just said, and reasoning as to why it's so high on my list of Pop-O-Holics kaiju films that we watched, is, like I mentioned earlier, the balance between human and monster characters in this film is so much stronger than anything else we've watched. Regardless of quality of CGI, I think in terms of narrative alone, it's a stronger film than a lot of these other movies, despite the fact that maybe some of these Legendary movies are a little more polished and have contemporary technology working in their favor. Just, as a whole package, I think this is a better movie.
Interesting. I definitely would put this below like 2014 Godzilla and Kong.
Did we watch 2014
we
Godzilla
didn't.
on
We
the
didn't.
show?
It's not technically one that we'd see, but it's one that I've seen. Yeah, I get that. We didn't even cover Kong Skull Island, so it's hard to like take my two favorite of the Legendaries because we didn't cover any of those. But those definitely are like
There are a lot of disclaimers with this ranking.
It is because we've seen different iterations of a lot of these movies. I'm tempted to bring up Pacific Rim as like that's one of my favorite American kaiju movies, and
Against the rules.
that's against the rules.
My.
So, like,
Disqualified.
it is disqualified, but it is a better film than a lot of these. Well, more enjoyable for me. Danny, how would you compare this against what we've covered on the Pop-O-Holics?
Yeah, I was thinking just that against the films that we've covered in the Pop-O-Holics. I mean, I really enjoy Godzilla vs. Kong and King of the Monsters just because there's a lot of fluidity of the monsters. It's a new light on seeing them. It's really cool to see all the kind of some of the classic stuff, especially like King of the Monsters. You see characters such as Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah.
And it looks so good. I mean, It
yeah,
looks
it
great
does. It looks
in all
great.
those
regardless
films.
of if the movie was good or bad or whatever you took of it, it looks fantastic. And you know, in a monster film, you kind of want to see the monsters look pretty awesome and, you know, kind of bashing each other.
Definitely delivers on that.
It definitely does.
And it's consistent because it's just good CGI as opposed to like some okay CGI, some really great miniatures, and then some other like compositing shots. It's just like, yeah, it's all CGI, but it's there. It's good.
Right. It's definitely a different era of Godzilla, and I think for the era, it is a fantastic film. It definitely is above King Kong versus Godzilla. It's I think it's probably that's like my bottom out of all of them. If I don't know. Yeah, I would probably say it's right. Obviously, the Shin Godzilla is number one, so probably right after the legendary ones. I actually really enjoyed Legendary's Godzilla, and their rendition
Not on the
of,
list.
Legendary's Godzilla.
It's just what we've covered
as
on the
in
show. It's a very
King of the
complicated list.
Monsters, and
He's saying he likes the MonsterVerse that Legendary.
thank you, the MonsterVerse. Thank you. Yeah, I really like the MonsterVerse version of Godzilla and all the films that have come with it. But yeah, no, this I wouldn't be able to put it in a rank without having all the other Godzilla movies to kind of go based off.
No, it's a fucking confusing list we've created.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Danny:
Sup?
Biollante or Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla? Which comes first?
See, that's a trick question. Personally, I
know Heisei era Godzilla is like your favorite Godzilla.
It is, and I usually have my favorite movies of an era. I usually will rank my movies by
Definitely
era.
has the better music, for sure.
It
Biollante,
absolutely.
100%.
by far has my favorite music of all the Godzillas ever in existence.
Damn, that's actually not a fair question, man. But probably after.
Answer the question, Danny.
I like Biollante more.
Okay.
Just because I like the Heisei era. If I had to be forced to choose, I like Biollante more.
And I'd say for the era,
I have to say-
even the special effects, Biollante, like I had my things with the Godzilla vs. Biollante, but Biollante is like gross and like the puppetry is just insane. Like,
yeah,
and it's
a lot
doing
of the
miniature
set
stuff.
pieces are fantastic. The miniature
pretty crazy,
work
yeah.
was some of it at its best in the Heisei era.
For sure.
I have to say, like that Heisei Godzilla, like you, is absolutely my favorite Godzilla design. I do not like the Millennia Godzilla design at all.
It's just kind of stuck between eras a little bit, right? It's just a little
There's-
too bit real, but it's still trying to have Godzilla's like traditional face, and they do animate the eyes more. Like the eyes.
I was gonna
animate.
say
that.
I do like the suit that whenever he roars or whenever he's surprised, you can see him opening his eyes more. You can kind of see his eyes
more- a little more detail.
evoke a little bit more emotion on it. I thought that was really cool.
But it leaves him in an
I did
awkward
not-
space of not being as like modern as the newer Godzillas and still
Absolutely.
being a little too old school for realism. So it's just kind of stuck in this in between. Yeah.
So, fun fact, well, not fun fact, but interesting thing that I kind of noticed on this particular film. Godzilla is a little bit less mobile throughout the entire film. When he gets shot at with missiles, usually in like Heisei and in even other movies in the Millennium era, he reacts to being hit with missiles or any sort of hits. He only really reacts when he's actually physically fighting Kiryu or whenever he's being hit with a maser, which is just a high-powered superheat that it's essentially he's feeling his skin
I believe it's
burn.
a DirecTV satellite dish that shoots yellow lightning bolts.
Yes, the DirecTV on that's what happens when you hack DirecTV and try to get the bad
that's
signal.
the free
you produce,
channels, yeah.
the maser. Yeah,
So you try to get free channels from Godzilla's torso.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's one thing I did not like about this particular film is Godzilla's kind of just he stands there when he gets shot with missiles and he doesn't react in any way until he very specific moments.
It's because they don't do anything. Missiles don't do anything to Godzilla.
Missiles don't hurt the reptiles.
He reacts the most realistically, as any Godzilla should, which is like, why do I even care?
You know what? That's a great point.
Saying.
It's like I'm the king of the reptiles, and these are mosquito bites.
In comparing, my feelings about
I don't like that our Godzilla impression is becoming a Cosby impression. That makes me very uncomfortable.
When I walk on the land, I like to shoot my atomic
The missiles taste like pudding pops.
And they hit the big reptile.
We got to get rid of this. This is not appropriate.
Cosby, super in vogue, almost as in vogue as
Oh gosh.
the star of In the Blood. Check out our weekly uploads for that inside joke. I gotta be honest, boys. We talk about all the Godzillas. We've talked about a lot of stuff. This movie is better. Okay, it's better. It's more representative of Godzilla. More interesting things going on. Probably better acting than the 1998 Godzilla, or as you guys call it, Zilla. But under like Shin Godzilla, which to me is like peak perfection, what we've covered is like what Godzilla could be, what it means, put it in a very interesting film. Of course, we're all in agreement. Zilla for me just ranks number 2 because I feel like when I watch this movie, it makes me think of 98 Zilla, makes me think of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It gives me nostalgia for things that I saw when I was a kid. And clearly, Danny, you're very connected to Godzilla personally, to that character. And for me, Godzilla was 98 Zilla. And we covered it. It's not a perfect movie. It's a pretty bad movie. But you know what else isn't a perfect movie? Also kind of a bad movie we're covering right now. It's not like it's like, it's not breaking very many rules of the genre. It just has a 90s flair. Guess what also has a 90s flair? Zilla. 98 Zilla has a very 90s flair. And there's lots, and again, to 98 Zilla's credit, there's some really good practical and even CG effects that happen in 98 Zilla. There's stuff to like respect about the destruction and mayhem of that monster movie / catastrophe movie. There's like stuff to respect. Is the story stupid? Yes. Is it stupid in a way that brings back memories of me watching free HBO? Abso-fucking-lutely. And it's got Matthew Broderick. Come on. I don't know who's playing this main character, this main male character. His name is, I believe, Shin Takuma. Is that correct? Right? He's the guy in the overalls.
Maybe?
Yeah, this gentleman, yeah, exactly, my point. This gentleman is the Matthew Broderick of the Japanese people, and he's so charming, and he's great.
Who are you referring to?
He's a better actor than Matthew Broderick. The father figure.
Tokumitsu Yuhara?
Yes, exactly. I said it. Shit, the actor's name.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. He's like a little better than Matthew Broderick, but guess what he's not? He's not Matthew Broderick for me, right? And he's in a very similar movie that came out in Japan on the other side of the world that I haven't seen until I was 30 years old. So due to the properties of nostalgic power, I just have to love the American Zilla more potently because it's almost as good. And I could argue as a 30-year-old man that Shin Takuma is giving a better, more human performance, and I think he's a better actor in this film than Matthew Broderick in Zilla. But I didn't see this movie when I was 8. I saw Zilla when I was 8. And so I watched this movie and it makes me nostalgic for just like comfort food. It doesn't make me more interested, doesn't strike anything. I think it is just as good, if not better, of a monster movie than the 98 Zilla. But if we're comparing cheesy 90s, 2000 action movies, I want to see the one with Matthew Broderick. And I think there's enough good shit there that's like fun. That's good. And if I want to watch a great monster movie, I'm going to watch Jurassic Park. If I want to watch a great commentary on Japanese culture, I'm going to watch Shin Godzilla. So I just don't see this ranking anywhere highly close to like anywhere high on my list of movies I've seen. And of course, I've said King Kong vs. Godzilla is a beautiful Adult Swim cartoon of a fucking movie. The American version especially, it's just like a special kind of something. And this movie is just kind of a generic kind of 90s something. And I'm sorry, as much as I enjoyed aspects, I have to give it to Zilla. I have to give it to King Kong vs. Godzilla. I have to give it to the legendary Godzilla vs. King Kong, because that movie sucks too, but like the monster fights are the best in the world right now. Like monster fights are UFC fight on adrenaline with giant lizards and monkeys. Like just watch the last 30 minutes of the movie.
And you would hope that would be the case, considering that it's the most recent. It's using the most up-to-date technology. Like, that better be the case.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. Except for King of the Monsters sucks ass, too, as like a monster fight. Because it looks okay, but it's all blue and shit. So, like, even that movie that we covered, that's on the bottom of the list. And that is the second most recent movie. And that is, I put this movie far above King of the Monsters, which is one of the most disappointing films I've ever seen in my life. So, that's hyperbole, but I'm putting Zilla above this film, and I know that hurts, Danny. I know it hurts, but I still love me some Zilla. We covered it.
You're entitled to your opinion,
Make
man.
a fish trap for
it doesn't mean it's
Godzilla.
right.
That's fun. Fish traps
Godzilla
for Godzilla.
Against Ebert is the
You know, the
secondary
fish
title.
trap is always the first thing I think about
Yeah.
when you mention Zilla.
He tries.
Zilla's
a lot of
very,
fish.
very high. But not as high. Listen, the Japanese are still taking the cake. They're still with their original Godzilla. Probably if we watch 50s, which we haven't done, but if we watch the 50s Godzilla, I'm sure that would rank above Zilla as far as like just a masterpiece and piece of cinema history. For sure.
That's actually something I was gonna say. Like, I cannot wait for you to see whenever that day comes, the 1954 Godzilla, because the three of us have seen it. I'm excited for you to see that movie and see where it ranks in all the Godzilla movies that you've seen.
I already know I'm going to love it because, clearly, I mean, just from historical perspective, it's the first of its kind. You know, it is groundbreaking movie making. It's not beholden to any history. It's literally someone like made up the monster kaiju movie genre in this picture. I mean, that for in and of itself makes it just wholly unique and its own special.
Yeah. And I want to put my foot down on record right now. I forbid you to watch the American version of that movie. You absolutely have to watch the Japanese version of that movie, because the American version does the same thing that King Kong versus Godzilla does.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
Chris, you always wear individual toe socks. I didn't know when you put your foot down there. That's those are nice. I like
Damn.
those. I need to get some of those.
They're so comfortable, Brian.
I don't understand the reference.
Dad jokes.
You guys,
Brian always delivering the dad jokes.
now that I've derailed everything, I just want to say, second Godzilla month has been amazing. I've had so much fun going through these.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
Yeah.
Danny, thank you for coming back. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I have fun doing it and appreciate the invitation. And it's always fun talking about King of the Monsters.
When Legendary inevitably releases another Godzilla movie in 2 to 3 years, I'm thinking Godzilla Month Part 3 has to happen.
Yep.
And I'm eagerly awaiting it.
That one, we should make the 1954 original probably
Yes.
a mandatory
It'd be about time.
thing.
Yeah.
And a rewatch of 98 Zilla. Just to revisit.
Once is enough.
Just to see how we feel about
Chris
it.
will never sit through that again.
Coming back.
At that point, we'll watch Final Wars and we'll see what the real Godzilla thinks of Zilla.
If you want to hear one of my favorite episodes, listen to when we covered the 98 Matthew Broderick Godzilla. We covered that in our last Godzilla month. And you know what? I'm going to put it on record. We're going to cover it again as long as I'm still helming this ship, or else I won't edit the show anymore, Chris. There you go. That's right.
Okay.
Yep,
All right.
exactly. Yeah, that's who's in control of things, okay?
Annual Zilla retrospective.
Yeah, that'll be the first movie that we cover twice. I'm going to make it be 98 Godzilla. Just because I love feeling in control, like humanity when they built the atomic bomb and when they built Michiru, the Mechagodzilla.
You know what, Christian? Maybe we just make it a commentary track episode.
You know, Chris, I think there's a deal that we could strike here. Think we could definitely reach an agreement. If you'd like to hear that or have any other fun ideas, you want to share your opinion of Godzilla, the 98 Zilla, Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla, or the latest film in the legendary MonsterVerse, please email us at popholicscast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners. It's one of our favorite parts about doing the show. You can also rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast and join us on social media that's linked below. We're now on YouTube, and we got some exciting content coming soon to that platform as well. So subscribe there. Just wherever you enjoy hearing from us or want to engage, we're there for you. You know, we're really just putting ourselves out there. You know, like a delicate flower, like a delicate plant that we hold in our hands, like a child, that we eventually give up in a post-credit scene in which only 50% of the audience stays to watch because we didn't know that there was a post-credit scene in this series of films. Danny, thank you so much for being on this month. You put in a lot of work for really... We haven't given you anything, so I don't know why you kept coming back. To be the rock of information and legitimacy that this podcast so desperately needs when it comes to specific content. So thank you so much, Danny, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. And you know what? You actually have given me something. Specifically, Chris. Chris has given me something, a title that I will forever cherish because I think it started as a joke, and I've kind of fallen in love with it. I'll absolutely take the Godzilla Guru.
Danny, whether you're using them or not, you better go and lock down every single social media username with that. If it's not already taken.
I need
Honestly.
to get on that. I probably should. I probably should copyright that. Probably can't, but why not?
You can also wait until you get your fully certified pilot, and then you can come on and we'll talk about Denzel Washington's flight. I don't know. Fuck it. And then you'll be we'll call you the drunk pilot. It'd be
Working title is the Geek Aviator, but I'll think about it.
Listen, the kids love booze. It's everywhere.
The drunk Geek Aviator.
Nothing feels more secure than sitting down in a plane and having the pilot going and being like, I just had 3 whiskey sours and we are ready to fly this fucker. That's when you're like, oh, strap in. It's going to be a good time. Wonder what the in-flight movie is.
Probably
Flight.
Probably fly, yeah.
Reminds me, I remember very distinctly, I watched before the first cruise I ever went on, a Carnival cruise when I was 13 or 14 years old with my parents. We saw A Perfect Storm in theaters, like right before we went on a cruise.
Of course.
Great timing. So if you're about to
Perfect.
go on your first flight since COVID lockdowns, pop on Flight, baby. Get some confidence in that. Head of the ship there.
Watch a little Lost.
Watch a little
Watch
Lost.
Yeah, there you go.
Watch Sully.
Maybe play some Flight Simulator. And if you're inverted, go regular. And if you're regular, go inverted. See what happens. Show's off the rails. Thank you so much, listeners. Follow us on all the social medias. Check the show notes for more details. And we'll see you next week on... Oh, hey, Chris, what are we covering?
Next week, Christian, we're going to be covering The Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
The Winter Summer
the entire
Sausage
series.
and the metal-armed menace known as Falcon Man. Very exciting. Check us then. We're covering all 57 episodes, all recut and ADR'd, especially for Disney minus listeners. What the fuck is happening? We're in an alternate
So
universe.
much of that was wrong.
Danny, what have you
Release
done?
the Falcon cut.
You've taken us
I
in the wrong
don't know.
direction.
Damn right.